Hey, welcome back to Rebel Movement Podcast. My name is Billy. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her, and I'm really glad you're here. I'm back with another episode where I'm kind of going back to, I don't want to say the basics, but just going to like foundational level of like what actually does it mean to be anti-diet? And like what does that actually mean? Um, a couple weeks ago, we did one meaning what does it actually mean to be inclusive? And we've done, what are the other ones? Anyway, the past few weeks, just been kind of going back to some things. Oh, like, can you get more flexible with yoga? Some things that, whilst they're like in the zone of this podcast, just haven't been things that we've talked about recently. So pretty excited to share it this week as well. Diet culture is something that we talk about a lot here. um, I talk about it in my newsletter a lot. I talk about it in my groups. I have a whole course on my website about like how you ditch diet culture and how you start to move your body for other reasons. But it's been a while since I've actually talked about what it means to be anti-diet and what diet culture actually is. So whether you've been doing this for a while and this is a refresher, or you're really new, you've never heard of this, you don't know what I'm talking about, this is an episode for you. Before we get there, I just want to do a little plug for myself. If you want to work with me, we can do a couple different ways, starting with like the lowest price thing. If you sign up for my on demand, it's only $20 Canadian a month, and you can practice as much as you want, whenever you want. There's a whole library of meditations, movements, and things like that on my website. I think there's about over 40 classes at the moment, and there's stuff being added all the time. And moving up, there's Rebel Movement Club, which is online group classes where we do mobility, yoga, workouts, all that kind of stuff. A couple of different pricing options for that. And then the next option would be one-on-one. And one-on-one is for you if you're wanting to do some of this work at looking at how diet culture has impacted you and how it has impacted your feelings about movement and your body and how to start moving your body for better reasons. We also can do movement for more specific needs, whether you have chronic health conditions or you're disabled and there's certain movements that don't work for you, or if you're going through some emotional stuff and you need stuff movements that's more accessible in that way. One-on-one can be really helpful for that. And if you go onto my website under the coaching, I think it's called the coaching, is it called the coaching tab? I have my website right in front of me, so I'm just going to look. Hopefully it's not loud. Private coaching, I was pretty close. There is a sliding scale graphic on there. If you're like, oh yes, I absolutely love that. That sounds good for me, but pricing is a bit of a concern. Go to that page, movewithbilly.com, click private coaching, and it should be down there. So getting into it, what is diet culture? I wish this was an interactive thing so you could tell me what your thoughts were about this. But the definition essentially is a system of beliefs that equates physical appearance and body shame to moral value, virtue, and health. It promotes it promotes weight loss as a form of achieving status, and it also demonizes food as well as fat bodies. It is the assumption that you can look at somebody's body and know their health and know their story and their value. It's not just about weight loss. It, as I said, demonizes fat bodies. It is an intricate, sneaky thing that is not as simple as maybe you're hearing this now and you're like, oh, it doesn't sound simple, but it's pretty complicated. It's really, I often describe it like a elaborate system of roots, like tree roots, super elaborate, super intricate, reaching really deep, really connected to so many different things. And it takes a long time to sort of sort it out and heal from it because it's sneaky. And some of the roots are kind of small or kind of hidden, and you don't really necessarily notice it right away. So while you might originally, start off this process of healing from it by recognizing actual dieting habits, or maybe you had certain behaviors that were connected to eating disorders, as you go, you might one day realize, like, oh, I have this belief that movement has to be really intense to be valid. It's intricate. And another thing that we can't really talk about, or we can't skip when we talk about diet culture, is um, anti-fat bias. And because we grow up in a culture that has diet culture all over it, we all have been taught implicit anti-fat bias. And so it's important as well to do this work because it can allow us to seek out where we have our own implicit fat bias and how we can like heal from that and do better and acknowledge how our behaviors or these things might be affecting people, because there's so a layer to this, several layers to this, the impacts of diet culture. While I'm trying to figure out the best way of starting this, so the impacts of diet culture, there's no way I could fit it all in one episode. There It's a lot. It's a lot beyond the fact that because of diet culture, so many people have dieted and had like developed a really difficult or toxic or hateful relationship with their body, or they really struggled with eating disorders, and that affects your health, and the dieting also affects your health and the money spent in it and the actual impacts of like individual okay, you know what, it's probably easiest to just explain it in a more specific way. Think about your life for a second, or if you've never experienced like impacts of diet culture, a friend's life, and just think about how their life was affected by it, like by dieting, by eating disorders, that kind of thing. I spent, I don't know, I don't want to do math, like half or more of my life hating my body, moving my body to punish it. I always felt like there was something wrong with my body. I was full of shame and hate for my body. It was tied to other self-harming behaviors. I spent like every waking moment obsessing over food or obsessing over my body. I engaged in some pretty harmful behaviors connected to eating disorders. And I struggled with eating disorders and I struggled with um, body dysmorphia. And it was like so much space in my brain was taken up by food and body and weight loss that there was no space for anything else. So it I feel like this isn't coming out right, but it was like it was very harmful. There was things said about my body to me from a guardian of mine who I had trusted, and that caused a lot of pain. And there's a ton of pain connected to my history with diet culture and my history with eating disorders in my body and eating and moving. That's just my experience. It's different for everybody, but unfortunately, my experience is not out of the ordinary, right? Like, I bet you any money that either you relate to what I just talked about, or you know someone that does, or know a lot of someones that do. So diet culture not only has all like has is connected to all of that harm, but also there are there's many other ways that diet culture causes harm. And one of those is, or I'm not even one, like some of it is connected to anti-fat bias. Because anti-fat bias doesn't just mean that folks are bullied because of their size. And it also means that in some cases they get paid less. They're less likely to get hired. They're less likely to get a raise. They're bullied. They're potentially abused. Their health is not taken as seriously by actual medical professionals. Folks in their family and their friends and their close circles will not only judge them, but say harmful things right to their face. There's a harder time traveling, like buses and planes, and they you might face I don't want to say just bullying because that doesn't seem like a big enough thing, like harassment. There we go. Just trying to do these things. There's also, like, if you see someone post on social media that's in a thin body and they are, take, say, doing a video of them eating fast food versus someone in a fat body video eating fast food, the comments are going to be vastly different. And all of this impacts our physical health. And it, like I said, some cases, physical health or mental health is just not taken seriously if you're in a bigger body where it should be. But all of this also impacts mental health in big ways. So this is, as I said, this is kind of the um, beginning of some of this work, but I do think it's really important to talk about. The beginning of like, this is just the beginning of what diet culture is. I'm not going to be able to talk about all of it in one podcast episode. I could probably do more, but if you're interested in this, as I said, I have a course on my website too. It is part of the Rebel Movement Club, so you just get it automatically by getting a membership. But if you want it by itself, just let me know. So let's see. Oh, the other fact is that diet culture or the weight loss industry, I believe it was done in 2022, was valued at $503 billion, billion with a B. $503 billion. That's so much money. At one point, can't remember what it is, but at one point I figured out how much, like how many hours of minimum wage work you'd have to do for that. I wish I'd written it down because I can't remember it right now. I tried to look through all my things too, and I couldn't find it. Um, that's a lot. That's a lot of money, right? Like that's an unfathomable amount of money. And if that's how much they profit, how much do you think that they spend on marketing? Like a lot, right? It's a lot of money that they spend on convincing you you are not good enough. So to do a really short little background check, I guess. Um, how do I say that? So we'll do like the too long didn't read version is diet culture is based off of not true, it's not the right word. Like we'll just say not true, problematic, racist data. Um, so there was, I can't remember, I don't have the stuff in front of me. I didn't really think I was going to talk about this particular part of it, which I don't know why, because it seems to make sense. Basically, um, this dude who wasn't I have to do a better, different one with a better explanation at some point, but this dude who wasn't a doctor, wasn't anything to do with health. He was a statistician, like someone who does statistics and a couple of other things, but not at all. I think like I don't know if it was astronomy. Anyway, astronomy. Anyway, he was not a doctor, not someone who knows about bodies or health. Did a study to try to find with mainly white men to try to find the average man or the ideal man, which was connected to eugenics, which is not a surprise if you're hearing this. And the average of that, it was called something else, but it ended up being BMI. And then at some point, an insurance company, I don't remember the name of the insurance company, took that formula that I can't remember the name of the dude, the guy who created BMI, that this insurance company took the formula, the BMI formula, and then used it to confirm or like to approve or deny insurance applications. And in a lot of cases, this was used to deny people of color from insurance, from getting insurance or their claims. And then it kind of was like, oh, you're not healthy because this is the thing, but it's actually not at all connected to health. There has also been several studies saying that dieting actually causes more harm, that it's worse for like that's worse for your body. And there's more and more studies confirming that size has nothing to do with health. Unfortunately, a lot of studies that have been done, particularly since this BMI thing started, are were done through a lens of having anti-fat bias. It's like when you go in with a belief and then you just do a study that confirms the belief rather than coming into it from a neutral point of view. So there's your little history. If you want to know more about that, I highly recommend, like I'll talk more about it and I have that course, but I highly recommend Maintenance Phase podcast. Also the one of the hosts of Maintenance Phase, Aubrey Gordon, has at least two books, if not more. One of them is You Need to Lose Weight and 19 Other Myths We Tell Fat People. I think that's like a must read. And then Sabrina String's Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia, also a must read. I will admit I haven't read that one yet because I want to read it with an actual book. And every time I go to order it, something happens and I can't actually get it, which is, I mean, it is a priority. I'm going to make it a priority. Just one of those things. We have so many books you want to read on your shelf that um, if I don't have it in front of me, I forget. Anyway, so that's the kind of short version of what diet culture is. So now that we've talked about what diet culture is, you're like, okay, well, I came into this wondering what anti-diet means. We didn't actually talk about that. So when it comes to diet culture and the anti-diet movement, there is a lot of different language that's used, kind of depending on, I don't know if it's the time period, like when it, like, you know, how language just changes. But you might have heard things like fat positive, body neutral, body positive, weight inclusive. There's a lot of different language that there's a lot of different opinion about. My understanding, which I mean, this, as I said, this stuff changes all the time. So this might be a little out of date when, you know, if you're listening to this in the future. My understanding is terms like fat positive are specifically about taking back, specifically about fat bodies. Like, how do I say this? Okay, I'm going to start from a different one. Body neutral tends to, while it is, I think it started off as more of a anti-diet term, it has kind of started off or kind of ended up being used in a way that's like, it's used by a lot of thin bodies, and terms like fat positive are more specifically feeling positive about fat bodies, like advocating for the rights of fat folks and advocating against anti-fat bias. So that kind of specific thing, which is needed when there is so much harm caused to fat bodies from diet culture. Not saying that there's things wrong with body neutral, just has slightly different implications. Same kind of thing with body positive. It started off, I believe, the movement was started off by fat folks and then was kind of taken by diet culture and taken by thinner bodies, and now often it's like body positive, but only if it's a small body. I use the term anti-diet. I have heard weight inclusive, which is also like that functioning under a belief that health does not relate to size, and that health is a separate thing. Anti-diet to me is more of a firm stance that I'm not just fat positive and body positive, body neutral. I'm anti-diet culture. Like I'm against diet culture. It's a very firm, I find it's like a really rebellious way of explaining it. To me, it feels like it, that I'm anti-diet. Like I'm anti-diet culture. I'm not, while like we talked about a couple weeks ago, I'm not going to judge you if you are still in diet culture and you're dieting. I firmly, my values and my beliefs are firmly rooted in the fact that you have value that is not tied to your weight. You as a person have value, that fat folks deserve better, that they don't deserve to face all of these awful hurdles. And hurdles is such a bad word for this. Um, the systemic oppression, and they don't deserve to, nobody deserves that. Fat folks do not deserve to be denied medical care because of their size, or denied mental health care because of their size. They don't deserve to be paid less because of their size, especially. And like, we nobody deserves all the harm that's caused by diet culture and eating disorders. And it's a system that's rooted on false data. That's the word I was looking for earlier, which is just such bullshit. And I'm firmly against it. It's like a, I don't know, I was gonna say like a punk rock stance against diet culture. You know what I mean? Like, against it. That's why I like that term. Language, as I said, is always changing. So I'm interested to see what happens in the future. But that's what anti-diet means. It means that if you are currently dieting, I'm not against you, right? I'm like, I am against the system that of dieting and diet culture. And I'm not really going to, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I'm not going to celebrate your weight loss. I will celebrate you doing hard things. I will not celebrate you losing weight. Like, I will not celebrate your weight loss. I will celebrate you learning to listen to your body and take care of your body in a way that feels good. Um, I'm not going to celebrate your diet. And I will always just point you in the direction of listening to your body and doing what feels good for you without judgment. And especially always take the stance of doing your own work to figure out your own internal bias and untangle those beliefs. Because as I said, it's complicated. It's not, I don't think that it's something that you can just, listen to one podcast episode about and you're like, okay, I'm cured. I have no more diet culture. It's complicated. We all have our own histories. Like, I was talking about my own history with eating disorders, and it took me a while to figure out that, like, some of the rules and some of the things that I had in my head. Like, I was taught some pretty stupid rules about food, and it took me a long time to recognize, like, oh, hey, wait, is this actually a thing? Or is this just a thing that diet culture taught me? Or is this just a thing that this other person told me? Do I actually believe this? One of the things that I talked about a couple of years ago on my Instagram is, I was running and it was summertime and it was so hot. And I just had this reaction of like, I can't take, I had a sports bra and pants and a shirt on top of the sports bra, not of the pants. I had this feeling like I can't take my shirt off because I have a belly. And it was just like a thing like about my body that I thought for, and I was like, wait a minute, why? Like, why? Um, I just like, I don't know, like, why do I have that belief? Do I actually believe that I should be more uncomfortable and overheat because of the size of my body? No. Would I say that to anybody else? No. Where did this come from? Whether it's from magazines or movies or my own internal anti-fat bias that I was taught, or, the people who said shit about my weight, or, you know, unfortunately, the list is long. I recognized this isn't actually true. And I started, I think in that video, I said, I can exist in my body however the fuck I want, which is why my merch has that on it too. My sweaters. I think there's a couple of sweaters. I don't know if there's any shirts. I actually don't know if the Etsy page is up right now, so I'll have to fix that. So maybe it's up now when you're listening, and I'll put the link in the show notes. But yeah. Um, it's complicated. And it's not that you're not doing the work, because sometimes you'll slide back and you'll be like, well, I've just been doing this work for so many years. How am I all of a sudden at the very beginning again? It's just in waves. Some days, you know, you're feeling good, and other days it all comes back and it feels like you're in square one. And then some days you don't, it's like I don't know, it's like you're digging up the roots of a plant. You can't get to the roots that are deeper down without first taking out the roots that are higher up to the surface, right? Like, I wouldn't have necessarily noticed my thought about um, just wearing a sports bra and pants if I hadn't done the work of digging up the thoughts about my body and the judgment about my body and some of those things. Um, and there will still be things I notice in the future because it's a complicated thing. But I think the most important thing is that you're doing your best, you're showing up to do the work, and you're learning as you go. And Yeah. So there you go. That's what diet culture is. That's what anti-diet is. What else did we talk about? We talked about anti-diet. We talked about diet culture. We talked about a little bit of the history of diet culture and some other language and terminology. And then again, just in case you missed them, those resources are Maintenance Phase, Aubrey Gordon's books, Aubrey with a B, and then Sabrina String's Fearing the Black Body. There's many, many other resources. I think I have some on my website. If you have some you want to share, you can drop them in the feedback below. If you have questions, if you have, yeah, ask me any questions about this. You can talk about your own experiences with healing from eating disorders or disordered eating or anti-diet stuff. Because I think that telling our own stories can be really empowering and helpful to other people. It can be really helpful to recognize, like, oh, I'm not the only one. So you can send all of those either in, if you scroll down on Spotify, there should be a little thing for feedback, or you can send it to info@movewithbilly.com. You can follow me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok @movewithbilly. But if you want to chat with me, Instagram is the place to go. And I will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.